Let me bring in Isabel Oakeshott, who's been listening patiently to this. Isabel, a lot of hysteria about what I thought was a fairly sharp piece of journalistic stuntery to elicit a genuinely fascinating response, which it did.
Well, what a load of sanctimonious twaddle from both Paul and Paula. I mean, Paula hasn't even watched the whole interview, so it's rather difficult to imagine how she can possibly be pronouncing on it. Paula said she was disappointed, and I too am disappointed, Piers, because I think you could have bet a whole lot more on that policy not working. Have you fallen on hard times or something?
I mean, honestly, I just came up with a figure in the moment. I had no idea what I was really going to come up with. I just thought it'd be interesting to test his resolve. Interesting to see what he... I just thought it'd be interesting to see how he responded.
Both of you could afford a lot more.
Well, probably. Look, I don't think
yeah,
it's going
I mean, both of you could have afforded a lot more. And at the end of the day, whatever the outcome of the bet, whether you're right and the policy doesn't work, which I happen to completely agree with you, I think it's a very safe bet, or he's right and he manages to get this policy off the ground, refugee charity is £1,000 better off. So I'm really struggling to see how anyone can genuinely criticise that. It's the first time I've ever heard either a successful TV presenter or a Prime Minister being criticised for being too generous in donating money to charity.
Well, I said exactly what I thought. I thought, honestly, and they all deliberately left that bit out of it. So they're all ranting away about rich people spending all this. Nobody mentioned in their critiques that this was actually a bet for charity. That's how I prefaced the whole thing. What was interesting, I think, about the interview, Isabel, I know you've seen it all now, was there were other things in that interview that I felt were much more newsworthy. One was where he basically called Keir Starmer a terror sympathiser over this banned group. We had that NHS doctor on the show who leads the UK arm of that now prescribed terror group in this country. And he basically called Starmer a terror sympathiser for trying to stop them becoming a prescribed group by acting for them. And the other thing I thought was really newsworthy was the confirmation by the Prime Minister that one of his key 5 pledges to get NHS waiting lists down, which he actually coupled with sorting out the crisis in the A&E, he failed on. Let's take a look. NHS waiting lists.
We have not made enough progress.
You failed on that pledge?
Yes.
Because you said NHS waiting lists will fall. But the waiting list is still nearly 500,000 more than it was at the start of last year. So my mother is 79 and she had a heart attack 3 months ago. And she was taken to a local hospital and she was seen when she got there, and then she was put on a trolley in A&E, in a corridor, for nearly 7 hours. The heart monitor battery ran out. Nobody fixed it. At one stage, no nurse came for 3 or 4 hours. And she was also terrified, of course, having been told you've had a heart attack, that no one was putting her into the unit and actually trying to fix her. Now, once she got up there, the treatment she got was world class. But I brought this one picture to show you. That's my mum. And when she really needed the NHS, eventually the NHS came through. But she could have died on that trolley. And I think that's shocking.
Yeah, that is a shocking story. And I'm really glad that she's feeling better now, and send her my best. And I'm glad she got the treatment that she needed.
This was a Monday night, Prime Minister. This wasn't even a weekend.
Yeah.
And it's not even a major city. This is Brighton. Yeah. And there were 40-odd people on trolleys in a corridor. Well, I got an email today, which we're trying to corroborate, Isabel, but it was from somebody else at exactly the same hospital whose mother died on a trolley in that A&E and was there for 24 hours.
Well,
and I think this is going on up and down the country.
I really want to pick up on that. Yeah, I really want to pick up on that, because if I were the Labour Party or any opposition party, I would play that particular clip of your interview on a loop and look at the Prime Minister's reaction. To me, this is the most insightful bit of the interview. There is something very, very wrong about the Prime Minister's reaction to your story. He shows no empathy. There is no form of shock in his reaction to your story. He's robotic about it. And that really, really jarred with me. And, you know, I am so glad to hear that when your mum was finally taken up onto the ward, that she got the treatment that you described. You said it was world class. But you, in a sense, you were lucky. Look, my mother recently died in an NHS hospital. I am sorry to say that she died in front of a lot of people, that none of us had any privacy. And in the seconds after she died, my sisters and I were taken into a store cupboard because there was nowhere private for us to go. So I wasn't planning on sharing that story, but the Prime Minister's reaction to your story has, if you like, triggered me to do that, because it was so lacking in any real empathy for the many, many thousands of people tonight who are on hospital trolleys and are not getting the treatment that they deserve. The NHS is failing, and he's admitted it, and it's failed on his watch.
Yeah, well, I'm very sorry about your mum. You and I have talked about that before, and it was incredibly sad for you. And I feel very fortunate that my mother was able to come through it. You know, to have a heart attack in your late 70s and then spend 7 hours on a trolley thinking, what is happening to me? With the heart monitor regularly running out of batteries and no one seemed to notice it was scary.
Awful.
Paul, what did you make of that part of the interview?
Again, I was looking at his face and thinking, look, Prime Minister doesn't get to meet a lot of ordinary people. And when he does, you know, you were very measured with him. But imagine, we can all imagine a voter saying the same story.
Right.
What would happen in general is that the people behind him would just gently edge him away. Yes. And I think that if he can learn anything, it is listen to these ordinary stories. I bet every single one of us, including all your studio staff, could tell us the same story. I've got stories of 48 hours in A&E.
I've had so many in the last 2 days.
So the NHS is failing. It so happens that we've had one party in government for 14 years, but I'd say, you know, there is a long-term problem with the NHS. I actually think, my hunch, I don't know about you and Isabel, my hunch is that people care a lot more about these stories of everyday hardship than they do about whether the Rwanda scheme deports 200...
And they actually care, Paula, more about the reality of human stories than they do about the over-top-line statistics. You can hear 7.6 million people on a waiting list. Yes. You can hear A&E's out of control. When you actually have a loved one trapped in that nightmare of waiting for an op to save their life or waiting to get put through A&E, it is terrifying.
Absolutely, and I think there's two things here. The first is that you're right. You know, when he's approached by a member of the public, we saw it just a couple of weeks ago, he laughed in response to that member of the public. He was caught off guard. He didn't know what to do. But that
clip was cut unfairly, actually. They then showed the longer clip, and that also happens now.
The second point that I wanted to make, though, was about the disconnect. It's the disconnect that we recognise in this story about your mother, and it's the same disconnect that we recognise in terms of the bet. We're talking about our Prime Minister, who doesn't have the capacity to be sensitive enough to understand that when he's asked about making a bet on what is something that for many is a life or death situation, be it about the NHS, be it about Rwanda, that he can just limply shake your hand on a policy that we know, or we are being told, aren't we, that he doesn't even agree with, but he's having to push through.
Look,
it's empty,
I like Isabel, I wasn't going to say this, but I think I will, just to be balanced about it, because the idea that he doesn't care, for example, about my mother and what happened to her and whatever facial reaction he showed at the time, I can tell you he sent her a big bunch of flowers yesterday, and then he followed up and called her without any recourse to me whatsoever. Called her for 10 minutes and had a really lovely chat with her.
The problem is there. You're
of course,
high profile.
Of course.
I'm not sure that helps.
But it was still a nice thing to do.
You know, if only he'd sent my mum a bunch of...
Of course, but he can't sell
he can't
do
exactly.
everybody. But my point being that I don't think he's a heartless man.
Nurses and the
I don't think he didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't think he's heartless. I think he does care. But I think that, I give them a little bit of slack, politicians, for facial expressions when they're being jumped with stuff which they're not really sure what it's all about. And I can just say that my mother was very touched by both the flowers and the phone call, and greatly appreciated what he said to her. And she certainly came away thinking this guy does care. Now, I completely accept I'm a television presenter and it was a big interview, everyone's talking about it, and not everyone gets that prime ministerial treatment. But he did do that, and I've not had a prime minister do that to any of my family before.
We're not voting for the Conservative Party on the basis of whether Rishi has sent your mum flowers.
Of course, I'm not expecting it to.
That's not what the voters...
No, listen, we've run out of time. But I'm simply trying to balance up the he doesn't care narrative, which I don't think is fair. He does care. I saw it. I spoke to him afterwards for quite a while, actually, after the interview. He definitely cares, right? But we'll have to see whether...
What's he doing about it?
The question is,
What is he doing
can any leader right now fix the NHS is a much bigger question. I'm not sure...
Keir Starmer.
Well, maybe, and he may get a chance before the end of the year to prove it.
To answer
We've got to leave it there, guys. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Thank you. Paula, Paul and Isabel, thank you all very much indeed. I appreciate it.